Welcome to the Fierce and Fit Mentor Podcast. I'm your host, 𝗂𝘂𝘀𝗃 𝗟𝗓, a holistic health coach dedicated to helping women over 40 achieve their fittest, fiercest selves. Each week, we'll dive deep into the unique challenges of menopause, including belly fat, weight gain, muscle building, hormonal imbalances, and more. These episodes are recorded live from my free Facebook group, Fierce Women Sculpting Powerful Bodies and Champion Mindsets. Be sure to check the link in the show notes to join our incredible community and access free content, challenges, and resources designed just for you. So this is the Fierce Women community where we sculpt powerful bodies and champion mindsets. This is the Muscle After 40, a different conversation. Now, this is part of our January Reset series. It's a 5-part series. We are now on our 4th week. Well, I'm going to start with, if you're over 40 and ever said, I lift, but I still can't build muscle, I want you to say me on here. This might surprise you, but even when you work out more, you can actually block your growth. You can eat more protein and still not have more muscle. And if you sleep poorly, your muscles just can't grow. I think people know like sleep is important. They know maybe that working out more doesn't necessarily produce more muscle. But typically, a lot of people think that if I eat more protein, I'm going to have more muscles. So muscle after 40 isn't just about doing more. It's about whether your body is receiving the right signal. And as a joke, a part of how we started, right? When I don't get the right signal, I can't continue with the live. I don't know what's happening on the other end. I have to close out the live and come back in. And I know it's kind of a joke, but it's not, right? Like it's like if your body doesn't get the right signals, it just can't continue forward. It's going to be stuck. It's going to be stalled. And this is kind of what today's live is about, is like, is your body even receiving the right signal? So we're going to dive into a little bit of analogy for you. Now, I always like analogies. Last time I talked about the airplane panel for the hormone signals and everything. But I want to talk a little bit about why this 5-week series is really important and where does muscle building sit in regards to a city analogy, okay? So I want you to imagine that in my first week, I talked about macros, okay, macronutrients. I want you to think about macros as the raw materials. The raw materials like protein, carbs, and fat are the supplies like bricks, steel, wood, all of this, right? You need raw materials, proper raw materials. But as you guys all know, if you bring in bricks, steel, wood, all of this stuff, it's important. But think about this, macros by itself, the wood, the brick just sits there. It doesn't build itself, right? It just is raw material, okay? So when somebody says, well, I eat lots of protein, so I work out, I don't know why I can't build muscle. I'm like, well, it's not just about that, right? Like, it's not just like, let's bring in the wood, let's bring in the brick. It's very important, but it's like just the brick sitting there does not mean more muscles, okay? So first think about that. And that's why knowing your macronutrients is super important so the raw material arrives properly in your body. But the second thing I talked about in my second week of the January Reset series, which by the way, if you do not have that free workbook, you can put workbook below. Again, Debbie can send that to you because that workbook gives you like at least something, a framework to look at and go off of, right? So the second thing is inflammation, right? I talked about inflammation. And so in a city analogy, inflammation is the traffic jams and the roadblocks. So if your body struggles with high inflammation, which a lot of women do, okay, you're going to have traffic jams. You're going to have roadblocks. You're going to have delays and detours and inefficient delivery, and things don't arrive on time properly. Things get rerouted. Things get wasted, okay, in your body. This is what I see for a lot of women who have inflammation or cortisol spiked bodies. And so like nothing is going to shift if you have blocked roads, detours all over the place. And so this is kind of why we have to work on reducing inflammation. You have to understand hidden inflammation markers. Now, Kat has been with me a long time. She understands that, but for her, it's about cortisol regulation. For Jacqueline, who's new, obviously this past week, I told her a number of things in her food, and I'm like, that shouldn't be something you're eating because there's like 9 inflammatory markers in there. And that might as well, what did I say to you, Jacqueline? You might as well just put like signals in your belly and be like, come here and put fat on, basically. That's what I said to her when she eats these types of foods. And so the thing why I want to bring up inflammation is if inflammation is there, the roadblocks are there, you are not going to be able to build muscle. Okay. Because the topic is on muscle, but I want you guys to have an integrative perspective on this, right? So unless that gets figured out, even if I talk about the rest of this live about muscle building, you're still not going to build a lot of muscle. Okay. So if the first thing you're like, I don't even know macros, I don't even know if I have the right raw materials, the first thing you have to go is I need help with macros. If you are struggling with belly fat and substantial amounts of belly fat on your body, belly fat by nature says to you, I'm inflamed. Something is wrong. I'm inflamed. And by nature, it's inflammatory. Therefore, it means your body is under an inflammatory state. Therefore, it's very difficult, almost near impossible, because I'm going to talk about signals that you can build muscle, not to burst anyone's bubbles. Who here is struggling with inflammation or belly fat? Put below. You know, we talk to women all day and we have a lot of women who's like, yeah. Like, I like muscle building. I want to be muscle. I want to be strong. I want to be fierce, which I love because, you know, this is the fierce woman community and like, let's flex some muscles, you know, like I love that for you. But at the same time, I just got to be honest, like you're putting the cart before the horse. If you are inflamed, you have hormonal dysregulation, you are inflamed and you're telling me I want to build muscle. I'm telling you that that's near impossible based on the signals that you're sending your body. So first, that has to get figured out. But for a lot of women, they're like, I want more muscle, but they're not looking at the things before that. So I just want you guys to have that in mind, okay? And then the third thing about the city analogy is hormones. Hormones in the city analogy is the traffic lights and the dispatch system, like the highway roads, the proper highways leading to the right directions and the right traffic signals, right? So hormones are super important. First, you need the raw material, correct, but they'll just sit there, macros. If your roadblocks, it ain't going anywhere. But then you also need the right hormone, like highways and traffic signals to send the right messaging system. Okay. So hormones decide where materials go, when they move, and what gets prioritized. So, example, insulin, the hormone insulin tells the body, send materials into the muscle. And that's why when you have great insulin sensitivity, which we're going to talk later about, you will have great response in your muscles. Okay. If cortisol hormone will say pause building muscle, we're in an emergency. So that hormone sends a different signal in the body. The hormone IGF-1, insulin growth factor 1, tells the body, the traffic light signal says we have permission to grow. Okay, so hormones give directions. And if someone has a dysregulated hormonal system, which often comes from inflammation or block or high cortisol and stuff like that, then their bodies are sending the wrong signal or not able to send the right signals through, right? And so this is the thing that I want you to also think about is, can you get the right signals to your body for muscle building? So if you're in a dysregulated hormonal state, you're not able to get the signals properly, basically. Okay. And so the example that like I know I mentioned Kat, but like Kat is kind of like that, where, you know, she overall is quite muscular as, you know, at her age and kind of like what she's built, but like her body is kind of hormonally a little dysregulated, cortisol is high, so her hormone signals are incorrect right now, and that's why slowly she's gained more weight. She started putting belly fat back on. In that state, the muscles aren't really going to keep growing, right? So again, you want to think about it this way, right? So I need to have macros proper, I need to have proper inflammation control, bring it down, get rid of the roadblocks, and then I have to make sure my highway systems are optimized. Okay. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. Listening on Spotify, tap that 5-star rating. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a quick review. It really helps the show reach more women. Now, where does the muscle sit in the city analogy then? Okay, so this is going to help you understand better. Where does it sit? So the muscles in a city analogy is the buildings and storage facilities. So think about the raw materials and then going down the routes, maybe hitting some roadblocks, inflammation, trying to get through the highway, the hormone signals. And then the muscles is like where the trucks deliver the essential resources and store the material. Okay, so it's the infrastructure and it's the building. So muscle is the place where nutrients are stored. It's the structure that energy gets delivered to, and it's the facility that uses the material. So if a city has lots of storage building, like as in lots of muscle, good muscle on their body, materials are used efficiently. But if there is very few buildings, like very few muscle, not a lot of great muscle on the body, materials will tend to pile up and spill over into fat storage. And so muscle is really important because it helps you know how to utilize all the materials coming into the body properly. Okay. And so let's talk a little bit more about muscle. Why is muscle more than just a building? Okay. What is its role? And we kind of know this, but I want to get you guys to think more precisely about this. Is muscle stores glucose safely, meaning it allows better sugar control and carb control. It absorbs amino acids, which is necessary for muscles to grow. It improves insulin sensitivity, which means that you have better signaling in the body for building muscle. Muscles reduces fat overflow, meaning you're less likely to gain fat when you have more muscles. And more muscles means it stabilizes hormones better. And I will explain this more specifically in a bit. So, muscle makes the entire city run better. So, yes, you're right. All the ladies who say, I want to build more muscle, I know muscle is important because everyone in the fitness industry talks about it, is correct. Now, muscle also, I call it an insurance policy. Why do I say it's your insurance policy? So, if something goes wrong and your stress spikes, you miss a meal, you travel, or there's hormonal fluctuations, which is all of us, right? Hormonal, travel, miss a meal, stress, right? Like this is very normal human everyday life. All of us is going to experience this. So when you have more muscle, like basically the city has a stronger infrastructure, it actually absorbs the shock better and it stays stable better. Meaning when you have like a lot of different things happening, you can keep your body at a better hormonal balance and better stability, and things are not going to shock it as quickly. Muscle, basically more muscle will protect against fat regain. You know, you can do a program and bring down fat and whatnot, but if you don't build muscle, you can potentially bounce back and regain all the fat, you know, because you don't have the infrastructure to hold it in place. So yes, it's super important that we get good muscles built so that you prevent fat regain, you prevent insulin resistance, you prevent hormonal chaos, and obviously you delay aging, or we call it muscles is anti-aging, right? For a reason. And muscles are anti-aging. Okay. So it's your insurance policy. Okay. Who here wants more insurance policy in their body? You know, put insurance policy. So we all know that, okay, muscles is super important and we all want it because we hear this all the time. Why muscle building is so different after 40, and kind of like then near the end talk about like some solutions. Okay. So for most women, it's not really a motivation or discipline issue. I mean, for some, yes. I mean, I know some do need to actually go work out more, but I'm really speaking to like a lot of women who say, like, I work out all the time, I train, but I still can't build muscle. This is really more a biological signaling issue. Okay. So we're going to talk about biological signals, okay, today. So after 40, the same stimulus produces a weaker response. Okay. So like the same stimulus before when you're younger is now a lot weaker. So in what ways is this a lot weaker? So anabolic resistance. As you age, your muscle cells become less responsive to protein, less responsive to resistance training, and less responsive to insulin signaling. And because of this change, that's why it's not just about eat more protein. You do need protein, but it's not just that. And it isn't about training harder. It's about the right signals, right? Because it's less responsive and it doesn't respond to insulin as well. And again, insulin is an anabolic hormone. Yeah, I don't know if you knew that. Yes, it does sugar, it brings carbs into your system, but it is anabolic. With the right insulin signal, you will have more anabolic signals to build muscle. But as you get older, your cells are not receptive to the signals as much. It's almost like you knock on the door, but the doorbell's muted. Does that make sense? Or you're trying to ring the doorbell, and before it's super loud and like the body responds like, no, there's no tomorrow. But now you're ringing the doorbell and the doorbell's like very small sounds, That's kind of what's happening in a lot of women as they age in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. The sounds in the body become more and more muted. That's called anabolic resistance. Okay, so that's rising in your body. The second thing is hormonal priority shifts. Okay, so after 40, estrogen becomes unstable, as you already know this from last week's live, and cortisol becomes louder, like the sibling that's the loudest, So it's the sibling that's the loudest now, right? And cortisol becomes louder. And like I said, insulin sensitivity declines. I already mentioned this, but your cells just do not respond to that insulin as well. And because of this, like, rise in the cortisol and the hormone priority changing, your body goes into protection mode, goes into survival mode. So what happens for most women, like you guys all said, I have trouble building muscle, or I can't really seem to build more mass, more shape, because your body is going to prioritize survival over growth, okay? When it has the incorrect signals, okay? So it's going to be like survival first. I'm just going to keep you safe, keep you stalled, keep you here, okay? Versus growth. What you need, obviously, is the hormones you primarily need when you're building muscle is insulin growth factor, IGF-1, and HG, or I guess GH, depends, you say human growth factor or growth hormone, GH. So you need growth hormone and IGF-1. These are the two biggest hormones for muscle building for women, not testosterone. In men, testosterone. That's why if a man does not understand your hormonal body and what's happening, their bodies function completely differently, okay? So we need these two hormones to muscle build. But these two hormones, growth hormone and insulin growth factor 1, are suppressed by chronic stress, underfueling, poor sleep, and excessive metabolic training. Which of the four do you guys feel like might be you? Are you chronically stressed, or there's high stress in your body? Are you underfueling, not eating enough? Do you have poor sleep, or do you do like too much metabolic training? And too much metabolic training, I'm going to say, is kind of like when people are doing like lots of HIIT, a lot of group classes, or a lot of, not all, but like a lot of group classes continue like, going and going, or CrossFit, or EMOMs, or, just really like metabolically high. What do you guys struggle with? Now, the third aspect is mitochondrial and tissue aging, okay? So this is going to happen, yes, as you age. So your muscle tissue loses efficiency. Mitochondria produces less ATP per unit of fuel. So like just less ATP per fuel that's coming in. Recovery takes a lot longer, and connective tissue stiffens, right? So what happens because of this switch, as you're aging, your body will down regulate it to being more cost conscious with energy. So it's more like, it's just like, yeah, like if you are not financially as in a good position, you're more like a little bit more like, okay, I need to be like here, and I gotta be like here, and I'm like here, versus somebody who's like, okay, I have more surplus, I'm doing better, you're a little bit more relaxed, you're a little bit more, I can like enjoy life a little bit, spend a little bit here. It's the same thing for your body, okay? Because if your body is like not having the just as much availability, its muscle tissue is not working as well, it just becomes more like, oh, I gotta like conserve, I need to conserve, I need to conserve, I need to conserve. And therefore, your body just cannot build muscle, right? So don't worry, I will talk about how to get your body into a better state later near the end on 3 areas, but it's just helping you understand why this is happening for your body, okay? If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. Listening on Spotify, tap that 5-star rating. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a quick review. It really helps the show reach more women. We're going to dive deeper into a cellular and DNA level now. So on a cellular and DNA level, we're going to go dive deeper into those signals that I mentioned because you need the right biological signal to produce muscle building. So muscle building is really a cellular communication problem, okay? Like when you cannot build muscle. So your cellular responsiveness declines, okay? So inside the cell, there's hormones outside in the bloodstream, like, coming in, trying to send signals into the cells. Like those are all important. But now we're going right to the cell, okay? Inside the cell, you have 2 pathways. Well, you have multiple, but I'm just going to simplify. So you have your mTOR pathway and you have your AMPK pathways, okay? Your mTOR pathway, this specific pathway inside your cell is the muscle switch. If that switch is turned on, your body, your whole body, like 𝗂𝘂𝗀𝗰𝗋, goes into muscle building process. But if the AMPK pathway is on, it's the stress endurance signaling that turns on, and that will stall a lot of things. And I'll talk about what happens. So I want you to think about the analogy like this, okay? So you have to have right signals coming in like Wi-Fi and stuff for your phone, right, to work. Otherwise the phone's not going to work. That's like hormones, right? Like the signals coming in. But your phone setting, if your phone setting is in airplane mode, if your phone setting is on non-airdrop mode and somebody's trying to send you something, the phone setting itself within the phone will block the signals. And no matter even if the Wi-Fi is good, you're still not going to get the signal into your phone. Okay. So again, I love analogies. I'm hoping this helps you guys understand this better. So a lot of women's phone settings are not proper, are not doing well, and is not turned on properly. And this is something where when you understand it better, then you can kind of work with that, right? So after 40, your mTOR pathway activation threshold increases, meaning it's much harder to trigger the mTOR pathway to go. Whereas when you're in your like 20s and 30s, the mTOR pathway is faster. It can like get triggered easier. Your AMPK pathway becomes chronically elevated. So your AMPK, as you age past 40, 50, 60s, often starts to climb higher, and the signals for AMPK gets higher, which comes from a lot of usually stress and, like I said, inflammation, load, improper workouts, not knowing how to work out. Like all of those things will switch AMPK higher. Okay. Too much AMPK in your body creates an energy conservation mode. Okay. So like, again, it just down regulates everything for you. So we're going to specifically look at AMPK right now. Okay. So we're going to go 5 areas of what AMPK will do because it changes a lot of hormonal environment in your cellular structure. Okay. So the first thing is when AMPK is high, when it's like activated, is tied to stress signaling. So cortisol goes up, right? Cortisol goes up and stays higher for a longer time when the AMPK pathway is there. Recovery hormones get deprioritized, meaning other hormones involved with your recovery, with your muscle building process gets deprioritized, and the body stays in a catabolic tone. I have a lot of women who come to me who do show me, what's happening with their body, and they tell me they work out all the time or they train, whatever, whether it's legs, arms, whatever it is, but, glute, like Kamiko needed to work on glutes and Kathleen is glute and, Fran is more arms. Like everybody has different things they want to work on, right? But like what I see is that people work out, but their body still looks kind of flabby or like not a lot of muscle on there. So ever wonder like why? It's like I work out, but I still don't have a lot of muscle and I still kind of look flabby. If that's you, I want you to understand that that probably means that your AMPK pathway is more the signal in your cells because it keeps you in a catabolic state and your body in a catabolic tone. So you're not able to build very strong muscle tone in your body and you still look a little flabby or a little bit like just there's not that much shape that you're wanting in your body there. And so if that's you, I want you to put catabolic because that means your body is not in the right signal to build. So when AMPK is there, basically it's like we're in an energy emergency, cortisol rises to help you cope. And then so therefore it kind of pushes you into, because cortisol is catabolic, into catabolic. So you work out, but you're still catabolic. You work out, you're still catabolic. You work out, you're still catabolic. Like that is not going anywhere, right? You should put catabolic if you have any of these things that you're potentially seeing in your body. Belly fat resistance, flat muscles, poor sleep, or feeling wired but tired. So put catabolic below if you feel like I have more belly fat resistance, I have flatter muscles, I have poor sleep, and I'm feeling wired but tired. I'm going to go to the next thing about AMPK. So AMPK, it affects your insulin. And I mentioned this before. So insulin becomes less anabolic, even if your insulin level is normal. I had said that insulin is actually an anabolic hormone, if you remember, which means muscle building hormone. But notice what I said. I said AMPK, if AMPK's pathway and switch is turned on, insulin becomes less anabolic, so it cannot do its work as well. So insulin manages blood sugar, right? But it promotes growth in your muscles. And so when it becomes less anabolic, it actually, like the insulin cannot impact the muscle cells as much anymore. And so like, again, you may have a woman who says, well, I do my macros, I eat carbs, I eat protein, but nothing seems to happen. And so then again, this is about signaling. Like the insulin is not being received as strongly and not able to get the anabolic effect. So the thing is that even if insulin is present, muscle cells are not in a receptive state. So insulin is not just about like blood sugar, it's also about the growth signal. And AMPK blunts insulin signal. So the key is we have to try to get out of AMPK signaling as much as we can. Again, we'll talk about a little bit of what that looks like later, but AMPK will blunt that, right? Number 3 is when AMPK is high, IGF-1 is suppressed. And I had said that IGF-1, insulin growth factor 1, is super important for muscle building. So when AMPK dominance is there, it reduces your IGF-1 signaling. It shifts your body away from growth and repair into energy conservation. So you might feel stronger, but you won't look it. You won't have the muscle size and tone to look it. And so this is also another very common problem. I hear a lot of women say, I feel like I'm stronger. I feel like I'm increasing weights. I feel like I'm stronger, but somehow I still don't look it. And so again, you could be stronger, but your IGF-1 being suppressed, you're not able to build more size or shape into your muscles. The whole idea of MTP is how do we get the best signaling of growth hormone and insulin growth factor without spiking cortisol? Or in more scientific terms, you guys understand now, without activating as much of the AMPK process. Now, your body needs a little bit of AMPK, just like your body needs a little bit of cortisol. AMPK in the right levels helps you like handle small amounts of stress, helps you like, cellular renewal, like small amounts, like AMPK can be a good process, but it's usually when it's dysregulated, when it's super high, when it's the dominant signal, then it's like your body cannot move into building mode. It just moves into conservation mode, right? Survival mode. Put MTP if you're like, I really want to understand how I can get better signals in my body. MTP, okay? Menopausal training protocol, okay? And this would be for anybody who feels like, I go to the gym all the time, I train, I feel stronger. I have so many women who tell me like, I train all the time, like I increase my weight, like I'm doing like heavier dumbbells and barbells and stuff, but yet they don't look sculpted, yeah? And there's two factors to it. You see, the two factors is one, how much fat is your body carrying? If you're like not super lean, of course, fat is going to cover muscle, but it's not just that. That is a factor, absolutely. But like, because fat makes it softer, right? But the other part of it is like, if you have a lot of fat, what does it mean? You have inflammation, and inflammation blunts all the signals. So it gets even more complicated, right? Like sometimes women just say, yeah, like if I just lose the fat, I have so much muscle underneath. And it's like, okay, so how long have you been trying to lose the fat and the belly fat? Oh, 5 years. And I'm like, okay, so like you're obviously not dealing with the inflammation in your body, right? Like it's the signals that are wrong. The next thing about AMPK. So when AMPK is there, growth hormone becomes less effective. So AMPK's pathway it's not a direct pathway with GH, lowering GH, growth hormone, but it reduces the effectiveness of how GH is used without going into a lot of science and pathways for muscle repair. So AMPK also lowers the ability for GH to repair your muscles. And this is paired with, if somebody has poor sleep, late nights, they're under eating, or they do high training volume. I want all of you to internalize is not just about going harder, but I have the caveat a little bit because there's another part of me that's like, but if you don't train or you don't go to the gym consistently or you don't even work out consistently, then I'm going to say you do need to work out, right? Like this is not to give a free pass for people to like, I don't need to work out. I'm more saying like for people who are like training really hard, training consistently, but yet not seeing the sculpting effects, the muscle building, that type of thing. Okay. And like I said, AMPK affects everything. Signaling, insulin growth factor, GH repair. This is crucial. You have to have the right signals, not just lift heavier, not just go harder in the gym. The people who follow me typically are not that. They kind of know, like YouTube hopping, YouTube hopping is like going from like this move to this move to this move. Oh, that looks cool. I'm going to do this. Oh, that looks cool. Like YouTube hopping is making more stress for your body. There is no system. You're not allowing your body to have like a standard system, and you do so much, then you end up having to do less effective workouts for the actual moves that count. And so this is like why stick to a program, don't overtrain, follow a system so the right signals can actually be sent out, right? So we talk about growth hormone. Number 5, the last thing about AMPK is estrogen and progesterone becomes less supportive, okay? So when AMPK is chronically elevated, estrogen signaling becomes less anabolic. You already have less estrogen already, but whatever is remaining, your estrogen signaling gets impacted by the AMPK to be less effective. Progesterone is dropping already in your body, but progesterone's calming restorative effects are reduced. So it makes it worse for your body. So like you will have poor recovery, like higher perceived effort, less muscle fullness, and more inflammation in your body. So again, the AMPK is making your estrogen progesterone levels signaling worse. Okay. So this is kind of why I always say we need to control your inflammation in your body and cortisol. I think that focus sometimes is wrong. It's not about I just need another workout or I need harder workouts. You need to deal with your inflammation and with your hormone signals so you can actually build muscle, right? So again, if you have belly fat or you know you have inflammation in your body, I want you to put inflammation below, because as long as there's inflammation in your body, there is cortisol in your body. And as long as there's inflammation and cortisol in your body, that means AMPK is activated, which means that this whole process, there's 5 areas that AMPK blunts your muscle growth. So the big picture is in AMPK, when AMPK is high, the hormone message is we are busy surviving. This is not the time to build muscle. AMPK will stall and stop everything. Even if a woman is lifting consistently, eating protein, doing everything right, her hormonal environment is improper and her body will only maintain, stall, and not grow. So for all of you who are like, you guys are at different points. Some of you are highly inflamed and need to fix that. Some of you are not inflamed. You did some of my program, but you're stuck. You're not growing muscle. This applies to you because it just means your hormone environment is not right. It will just maintain, stay stuck, or not grow. So again, remember, what works for you in your 30s will backfire at 45, 50, 60s. It's not about more workouts, more discipline, more restriction. It's about better signaling in your body. For example, like Tammy has a very dysregulated kind of cortisol system, a lot of belly fat, and we're dropping her down. But because she had like multiple types of belly fat, her training, I didn't really want to tweak or really like increase intensity or do anything much until more recently, just a few days ago, I gave her a couple recommendations because I needed to wait till her cortisol and her system calmed down through some of the protocols and nutrition first before pushing another signal towards it. And so this is, again, that same thing of like, we need to progress your signals progressively depending on where you start. And so sometimes when you hear me speak, it is not like, okay, now I need to go do this all at once. It's like, okay, like what's the first signal we need? Then what's the next signal we need? And then what's the next signal we need? Like the sequencing is important. And then so continue with like the cellular DNA expression, because I was talking about cellular DNA, is as you age, your gene expression just becomes less efficient. So we call it epigenetics of like how is the gene expressed, right? Your lifestyle will determine whether these genes turn up or turn down, right? And muscle building genes require adequate amino acids, insulin presence, not insulin resistance, low inflammatory load, and proper recovery time. In order for you to build muscle, you need adequate amino acids. You need insulin presence, not insulin resistance, low inflammatory load, and recovery time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. Listening on Spotify, tap that 5-star rating. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a quick review. It really helps the show reach more women. So coming back to the muscle building genes, okay, the adequate amino acids, which comes down to nutrition, insulin presence, which means do you have proper hormone signaling or are you insulin resistant? If you have belly fat, a lot of times that's going to stall your muscle building. If you have high inflammation in your system, you're not going to be able to turn on the muscle building gene. And if you don't have proper recovery, you're not going to be able to turn on the muscle building genes. Okay. And another part is why protein alone like isn't enough is protein. I mentioned this, like if you bring in the raw material, but nothing after that is proper, the raw material just sits there and that's it. So if you have inflammation, roadblocks, the hormone signals are improper, the highway system is not going the right way, the protein that you bring in, because everybody tells me like, I need to eat protein, or I'm going to buy protein shakes, I'm going to eat protein bars. And I understand that. I'm not saying protein is not important, but like if you don't have the right signaling, the protein ends up getting oxidized. It gets converted to glucose through a process called glucogenesis. And the protein gets used for repair, not growth. So it's not just about more protein. What a lot of women need is actually understanding nutrition, better understanding of nutrition. So, put below like muscle building nutrition. So let's talk about what can you do in kind of some general aspects of training, nutrition, and lifestyle to help you with getting better signals into your body. Now, I want you guys to think about this. This is general, and remember that every person's body is different, and that a lot of times you need a little bit more precision if you really want to get the right signals and hormones in place. So it's not all like one size fits all. You guys already know my philosophy on that, but I'm going to give you some general things to think about. Okay, so first of all, let's dive into training differently after 40. Okay. So, one of the things that you really need to stimulate muscle growth is you need bigger compound lifts that hits multiple joints. And I've mentioned this before on one of my muscle building lives. So if you sit there at an arm machine, bicep curling, and doing tricep things, I'm going to tell you, good job, but ain't gonna work that great. We need to work other parts of your body if you want the right signals. And I did say this, I think, to one of my clients before, is I cannot train somebody who comes to me that says I just need to work this part of my body. Like I'm like, no, like, well, like we can focus on it, but I still need to train all the other parts of your body. Why? Because of this fact. Because it's not just about that one joint or one muscle group, it's about the whole signal that you need. And the best hormone signals come from bigger compound lifts, multi-joint things. In the workbook, I say like a couple of the major big lifts, like which was great, like the squats, the presses, the pulls. They are very important, but also multi-joint things. And the ones who do my program kind of know that. They're like, there's a lot of things that happen in this one move. I'm like, yes. So there's certain things that you want, certain moves that are going to be hitting more at once is going to give you a much better bang for your buck. Another part of training is hypertrophy over chaos. So not just exercising to exercise, but exercising to build muscles. Please write that down. I really feel like, and I should quote that somewhere whenever online or something. Don't just exercise to exercise, exercise to build muscles. Okay. I'm really happy that if you move, it's better than being a couch potato. I'm happy about that. But the fact is, you're not going to build more muscle by just moving. Dancing is not like that. I'm using dance because I'm a dancer and there's multiple dancers. Dancing is not a muscle building thing. That's great. But Kamiko still needs to go and lift weights to build muscle. But it is a great exercise and I love it. It's my passion. But you still need to go lift weights. You need to train to build muscle. So we're not just exercising to exercise. You need to exercise to build muscle, which specifically the term is hypertrophy training. Now, today's live is not to get into like hypertrophy training, strength training, the different like science of like muscle building, which is in my muscle sculpting masterclass. That one goes into like the science, into the visual of like what happens between like hypertrophy training versus strength training versus different forms of training, what happens in your muscle. But hypertrophy training is a specific way of training your muscle that allows you to build more size and shape in, okay? And so this requires specific types of reps, specific technique, because powerlifting is about pure strength output, which is great. And I love it. And I trained with a powerlifting coach last year. I think there's a place for it, but it's not going to build her like amazing shape on her body. It's just going to give her really good strength, which is great. Yeah. It just depends on what you want. But the way you train hypertrophy training, you need, certain number of reps, certain controlled tempos, certain eccentric, concentric, like up, down movement type stuff, training to not always failure, but sometimes near failure. What does that look like? And the rests and sets between are different for different types of training. For powerlifting, it's longer. The rest times for hypertrophy training is slightly less time rest between. So there's different methodologies of training that you want to go for hypertrophy results. Okay. And then, of course, hypertrophy over chaos is what I said, right? So we really want to be careful about HIT. We want HIT a little bit because HIT does boost GH, but we want to be super careful because it raises cortisol. It competes with your mTOR pathway and suppresses IGF-1. So again, MTP, my menopausal training protocol, is about knowing where do you put some of these types of training protocols in to get the best signal. Okay. And then, of course, the last thing is training frequency and recovery. So in terms of training philosophy to get more muscle, is remember, more is not better. You need consistency of training and recovery. This is really important for menopausal women. Okay. Muscles grow between sessions, not during. So we got to have good recovery time in between as well. So again, put below if you, yes, want MTP. If you already put it, that's okay. Slash hypertrophy training if you are wanting more sculpting, kind of that kind of like muscle building process. So this is kind of like the things to think about when you want to grow more size or more shape in your body, which is again bigger compound lifts, multi-joint lifts, making sure that you focus a little bit more on hypertrophy over too much chaotic jumping around, different moves, HIT training. Make sure there's a good structured program for that, and then training frequency and recovery. Okay. So next we're going to dive into nutrition for the muscle signaling. Okay. So what we need to do in nutrition is we need to fuel growth instead of stress. And everything comes back to me trying to control stress in the body. So your protein threshold does matter. Like I said, protein is important per meal, like how much protein you're intaking and how you're spreading your protein throughout the day. And mTOR pathway requires like minimum amino acid signals. Like it needs certain amino acids in there to make it happen. And you might have heard of EAAs versus BCAAs, like essential amino acids versus branched chain amino acids. And you do need those like 9 essential EAAs, because that you do not produce it in your own body. Without getting into a lot of the science, like there is certain ones that does more than others, okay, in your body that you can optimize for muscle building. And a lot of times people take BCAAs, branched chain amino acids, which is leucine, isoleucine, and valine. They do signal a little bit more mTOR pathway briefly, but they need a full gamut of the EAAs, essential amino acids, to turn on a more complete signal in the body. So why do I say this is because I always say quality, quantity, and timing. I always say this. This is where it gets a little bit more complex because you can have protein, but if it doesn't have like all the essential building blocks or certain ones that need to be higher, you're still going to not have the full right signal or not as good of a signal to get it in place. Muscle building nutrition is important. Is about understanding like the right types that can improve the signaling in your body. So yes, the EAAs and having a certain compounds more within your body will help the muscle building signal. So put muscle building nutrition below if you want to understand that better. The second thing in nutrition is carbohydrates. Okay, so I talk a lot about this in my macro live. Okay, carbs are not the enemy. Insulin is anabolic. Remember this. If you have the presence of insulin, you will send a signal to build muscle for your body. Actually, one of a bodybuilder's like best friend is carbs. I said this before because it's anabolic. It actually helps you build muscle. It actually pushes your signals in the right direction. And so you need carbs to shuttle amino acids into the cells. You need carbs to support insulin growth factor 1, the hormone we need to build muscle. And then we also need the carbs to lower cortisol. Okay. So when you undereat carbs, you will end up with flat muscles, poor recovery, and increased fat storage. Carbs are not the enemy. You need carbs. You just need the right amount of carbs. But a caveat to that, if your body is highly inflamed, highly insulin resistant, we need to be more careful about how the carbs are loaded into your system. So it is a bit complex. Carbs is not something that is, okay, now just like go crazy on carbs, but it has to do with your hormone signals and where's your current hormone state right now. This is the tricky one. It's a little tricky. It just connects to a lot of different hormones. It influences a lot of hormone signals, but it also can go like a little bit off tilter if your hormone signals are not proper, because insulin resistant means more carbs in the system, more carbs in the blood sugar, potentially more belly fat, but yet you need carbs to be able to build muscle, right? Like, so it's a bit complicated. So if you're like, I need to learn more about carbs, put carbs below. Okay. And then number 3 is fats. Okay. So I always talk about fats being super important. If you're too low in fats, you're gonna suppress your hormones. Okay, you need fats, healthy fats, for hormones to function. But if you're too high fat and you're not too sure like how that works, it can cause actually more insulin resistance in some cases. Okay, so quality of your fats matters more than extremes. Okay, so it's like quality of food, quantity of food, and timing of food. Add one more part here, then we'll wrap up. But like, again, everyone who's listening, tell me, like, what do you enjoy learning about on here? Like, what is this something they're like, wow, I never thought about AMPK. I never thought about, this part, like, I don't know, like carbs, or, like, what is something you're enjoying learning about? Put it below. Is there something new that you've like thought about? Like, I never thought about it this way. Put it below. What is it that you're enjoying learning in this? Okay. The last part is lifestyle factors. So lifestyle factors also influence your muscle growth, right? So these are the quiet factors that make or break your muscles. Okay. So yes, sleep. Yes. In your sleep, having good quality sleep, GH is the highest in your sleep, in your deep sleep. Okay. So if you have poor sleep, that will blunt muscle growth. If you have a lot of late nights, cortisol tends to dominate more, right? So it becomes much harder if you have poor sleep or you're overnight worker. You cannot outtrain poor sleep after 40. Unfortunately, like, I've trained 3 nurses that are all overnight workers. One is from Australia. That was 𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂 Joanne, and now Kathleen Bernath, and all of the, no, not Kathleen, sorry, Tracy Norman, sorry. And they all exhibit similar, like, there's a little bit of the cortisol belly, cortisol, like, so it's like you really cannot, there's a big effect of sleep on you being able to build muscle. Okay, so really protecting your sleep. Number 2 is stress load. Is emotional, psychological, and caloric stress all count. If you have high stress in your body, you will produce a catabolic environment in your body, and your muscle will stay safe, or just stall, like safe, like I'm not going to grow. Okay. What causes stress in your body? I have a lot of women, and look, the age that I coach are retired, right? Not everyone. I know Kat's not retired, Sherry's not retired, but a lot of women I coach are retired. 60, 63, 64, 65, 67, 70, 75, like 79, like, are retired. So it isn't about just work. It's something else that's causing the stress in their body, that's causing the slowdown. So again, I'm just going to reiterate this. And if this is one of them, then you should put it below. This is one of your stressors in your body. You're continue to have high inflammation in your system or hidden inflammatory foods. Okay, that's one. That might be one of you or a few of you. You're continue to have high inflammation or hidden inflammatory things in your food. Another stressor, you have wrong macros, improper macros that do not help your body in its situation. Okay, improper macros. Okay, that causes stress for your body. Stress comes in multiple forms, right? So which one could you be? Which one could you be? Inflammation, wrong macros, improper hormone signaling, maybe poor sleep. The last stressor is actually improper training. Yeah, and that is a lot of people, improper training. Either one of two things are happening. One, you don't train enough. It's not the right things that you're doing. You're not giving it the right signals, or you're overtraining. And so the wrong signals, maybe it's wrong training, right? Now, the third thing is, the most important thing is, not the most important, but like after all these things, the next thing is consistency is really important over hero weeks. Okay. So it's not about just like, I suddenly need to go work out because Clarice says this, or I suddenly need to do this. It's about consistent rhythm, consistency in your training. The more consistent you can be, the better your signals will fire. Okay. So just to wrap it all up, is why women think they can't build muscle, or why they feel like I'm doing all this work and I just see a little bit, like I get a little bit stronger, but I'm not looking sculpted, is kind of reframing this whole philosophy. Is not that you can't build muscle, but what you're probably doing is you're sending the wrong signal by underfueling, overstressing, wrong training signal, and poor recovery. This is probably what's happening. And we need to fix that so that you can actually train properly and then get the results on more sculpted muscles, right? If you want to see inspiration, put Kamiko. Obviously, she looks amazing in like her photo of more muscle mass on her body. And it just shows like when you are in the right phase and the right signals, you can actually make it happen. But we got to change your conversation. Your conversation is not, I need more workouts, I need to go to the gym more. It's not that I need to work out harder. It's, I need to change the signals in my body so it can actually build muscles. Okay. So hopefully that made sense to all of you. Like I said, if you don't have the free workbook, get the workbook so you have the structure to kind of like understand what I'm talking about. Again, if you loved it, let me know. It always helps me when you guys give me feedback. Like, I love learning this. This was awesome. And keep checking back in the group because we have more new things being released. Sending you all lots of hearts. Hopefully you guys loved learning, and I will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in to the Fierce and Fit Mentor podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit the follow button on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, or wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. If something in this episode resonated with you, please leave a review or share it with a friend who'd love it too. Your support means the world and helps us reach more amazing women like you. Until next time, stay fierce, stay fit, and let's keep building your most powerful self.